Mekhi Blackmon is traded, and that is just the start of the flurry of news as cutdown day has arrived. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's a very special day at FanDuel. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, and you're going to want to do that today. More on that later. Today on the show, most of the show is going to be a 53-man roster projection. My final one, as it is cut down day. It's already wrong, by the way. I did this last night. I told you I would do it, and I'm going to stick to the one I did last night, and I'll be honest about that, and I've already been proven wrong because Mekhi Blackmon was traded to the Indianapolis Colts for a 6th-round pick. Straight up, just a 6th-round pick. So there's a couple things to break down about this, and then we'll go into the true 53-man roster. But with Blackmon, it's a little weird, isn't it? Like, he's the only other inside corner, like true flexible corner in the league. Jeff Okudah, not a slot, or at least not traditionally a slot. Everybody has to play a couple of snaps in the slot just because of the way motions and formations work, but he is much more at home as an outside corner. Isaiah Rodgers, very much only an outside corner. Byron Murphy plays inside, but he's the only one. What if he twists his ankle? Zemiah Vaughn only played outside this preseason. Dwight McGlothern only played outside this preseason. The inside guys on the second team outside of Blackmon or on the third team, I guess, were like Khalif Hailasi, who I don't think is making the team, or Tavier Thomas or somebody like that would have to go back to their old position. It's a little weird that they had a very clear starter and a backup setup, and they're getting rid of the backup. Now, Mekhi Blackmon did not have a perfect camp or preseason. Like, he definitely did play poorly enough where if there were an exciting young rookie nipping at his heels, then maybe this would make a lot more sense. But there isn't really that guy. If Byron Murphy goes down, somebody is either playing out of position or you're gluing Josh Metellus to the nickel and taking away all the multiplicity that makes him special. And that takes away a personnel diversity aspect that Brian Flores' defense really likes. He loves to be able to use big nickel and traditional nickel. He loves to be able to put one or the other on the field depending on the needs, depending on the situation, depending on the game plan. He loves to make it so that you can't game plan if you find some weakness in Theo Jackson's game. You can put him off the field for that whole game and make all that game planning moot. That's a part of the cat and mouse game here. So the less multiple that Brian Flores' defense gets, the less he has access to all the tools that we have come to know and love him for. It's really weird to do that on purpose for a 6th-round pick. Doesn't make a lot of sense on its own, and it's not a move that is going to happen on its own. It is combined with the Sam Howell trade, a 5-6 swap, and then a 2027 7th. By the way, the 5-6 swap is conditional. That came out later. I don't know what the conditions are, but something to keep an eye on. But so that is another addition of draft capital. Not to mention the picks they got for the pick they got for Harrison Phillips. They are amassing day 3 draft capital for something. The way that people have been reporting this, both privately and publicly, what I have heard, it's not that different from what you have heard, but it's a little different than what you have heard. There's a little bit of like grapevine whisper crap that I don't put a ton of stock into, but there's enough of it where it should probably be part of my calculus. So what I will say is you might not be thinking big enough. That's the vibe I keep getting, is that I keep learning that I'm not thinking big enough about this. However, Adam Thielen is one of the names that has cropped up a ton. Bunch of different reporters have had their version of the report that the Vikings and Panthers are motivated to do it. Thielen is into it, and they just can't quite get the compensation right. And it seems like that negotiation has reached something of a standstill, but suddenly all this new day 3 capital is around. So maybe this will happen. Maybe this will have happened by the time you're there. That is why I still have a roster spot carved out in my 53-man projection for like TBD acquisition, waiver claim or trade candidate. But let's get into that. A couple of other news items real quick that have already happened. It doesn't change my my projection at all, but Leroy Watson and Oscar Chapman were both released. Leroy Watson was an easy call. Oscar Chapman actually, I think, gave Ryan Wright a really good run for his money as a punter, but ultimately you bobble the one hold, and that's kind of all it takes. But he is an international exemption, so he can be on the practice squad for free without using a practice squad slot. So he'll most likely stay in the building. And if Ryan Wright slips up, you might maybe go back on that. Or if, he can get a little better at holding and you feel a little better about it, like that option is available. Okay. So here's the 53-man roster. I've done a number of these. I did them right after the draft. I did one right after OTAs. I did one on either side of the first preseason game. And then here is one that I am doing now. So the quarterbacks we've talked about a lot yesterday. JJ McCarthy, they just got Carson Wentz, Max Brosmer. That's going to be the room. If you want to know more about that, I had a whole show about it yesterday. Running backs. Okay, so what I did in the post-week 1 53-man roster, and what I almost did again, was actually keep both Xavier Scott and Ty Chandler. Obviously, Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason are going to be your bell cows here, and it's a matter of who gets that third spot. Xavier Scott has won that third spot. I think that has to be the case. The way that his preseason and his camp have gone, and the way that Ty Chandler started getting less and less run. Also, I also saw a rumor. I forget from where or how verifiable the rumor is, but I guess I'll just throw it out there just as something to keep an eye on, that they were even shopping him a little bit ago. So I could see Ty Chandler getting traded for another day 3 pick, and maybe they package all these up together and get something greater than the sum of its parts. But for that reason, I am not going to put Ty Chandler on my final 53. I would not be shocked at all to see both Chandler and Scott make it, but because they both play the same role on special teams, they are redundant with each other. It's just, we'll get to it, but I'm keeping a lot of players that I don't think are as good as Ty Chandler. I think there's just like a positional redundancy here. CJ Ham is there. Make sure you don't forget to count him. At wide receiver, this is the next one where it gets a little bit tough. You have Jefferson. Jalen Naylor may start on PUP, or not PUP. He would be on IR with designation to return. And of course, Jordan Addison is going to be on the reserve suspended list. So you could have two guys on the reserve list here, meaning that you have Justin Jefferson and then like Lucky Jackson and Ty Felton would be your top 3 receivers. You got to do something about this. And I do believe that that's where whatever is going on, I do think that it's pointed there, whether it's Thielen or otherwise. So I have carved out a free agent / trade. I do have Naylor on this. He's week to week. That doesn't sound like you're going to be out a month kind of thing necessarily. So I do think he does at least start the season on the 53. One thing I will say though, and this is a great moment to kind of talk about this, as we have very little intrigue on the tight ends, right? I have Ben Urasek as tight end 3. That guy could also not be on the roster right now. Could end up being a return of Nick Muse, who's likely to get cut from Philadelphia today. Or who already got cut, I think, actually. It could be Nick Muse rejoining and he takes the tight end 3 job over this undrafted rookie, but they seem happy enough with Urasek, and then, of course, TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver. But what I'll say about all of this is the roster as it is at close of business today is not going to be the week 1 roster. They do all kinds of weird things because of the way the rules work. I will explain it if and when they happen, but stuff like, if you're going to go on IR with designation to return, you need to be on the active roster for a day first. So you need to keep somebody like, say, Elijah Williams, who might also be one of these guys, or if you do that with Naylor. You have to put him on the roster for a day, and then you'll move him to the IR list the next day, and then that roster spot opens back up. So what a lot of teams will do is they'll take their most trusted veteran and cut him. The Vikings have done this with Andrew DePaola. They cut Andrew DePaola, cut him, quote unquote, and he sits on the open market for a day. He's a vested veteran, so he's not exposed to waivers. You don't do the waiver process. He just sits there for a day with no contract. You then move the guy to the IR that you have to move, and you re-sign DePaola to the same contract. And it doesn't mean dang thing to DePaula. There's no problem there. It gives him a day to technically betray the Vikings and go find a job elsewhere or whatever. But you kind of just handshake and say, hey, we'll see you back tomorrow. We just need to make this roster spot for a day. So what kind of weird stuff will happen there? And I think the Wednesday roster is a better one to like try to predict, which is what I'm trying to do. The only other guy I have here, I did keep Miles Price, but what I found was I just couldn't think of anyone else. Deshaun Jones, maybe, but he had some bad moments. He was also running primarily with the threes. I could very much see this being a 5-man group, but if Naylor is on the IR list and Addison is on the suspended list, Addison's another one that has to be on the roster for a day. So if that all plays out the way it does, you would be down to Justin Jefferson and Ty Felton as your only locks to make the roster. A lot of the Vikings reporters don't think Lucky Jackson will make it. I still do, so I still have it on mine, but a lot of the reporters think that he fell out of favor because he didn't really show out in the preseason the way he was showing out in camp. So like somebody on this team is making it, and I think the guy that showed a little bit of run as a returner has to be the one. We'll talk about the trenches. Not a lot has changed there, and continue on with some of the other. I'll get to the weird roster stuff you have to know as we get to it. That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. August 26th, that's today, everybody, is officially FanDuel's FanDuel Futures Day. A brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours today, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling an MVP, a division winner, Super Bowl, whatever it is, this is your moment. You can take a flyer on J.J. McCarthy to win MVP. You can take the Vikings to make the playoffs at, I think, like plus 107. It's fluctuating, so I don't know what it is that you're looking at this. You can take J.J. McCarthy to pass for over 75 and a half yards. You can take some kind of flyer of Super Bowl odds of anybody if you want, or any number of weird parlays. 3 NFC North teams to make the playoffs is plus 340. That's a special from Kay Adams. If you like it, you can thank her. Visit the FanDuel app today, and whatever your futures bets are, start planning them now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Moving along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast, let's continue on with this 53-man projection. This is the last one I'm doing, and I honestly don't feel very good about it. I don't think I got a lot of stuff right because I think a lot of people from outside the organization are joining. I cannot remember a year like this. I think this is the one where the real bottom roster depth is the worst. And look, it's a little top heavier. It's not a huge deal if player 49, he might not even suit up or whatever. But I can't remember a time where there were this many positions where I struggled to think of one to be that last guy, where there was just nobody that really had stepped up and taken it. That is not the case on O-line or D-line, where there is, on O-line, it is a clear 9 guys that I think has been the easy call, and it has always been this way. They are Darisaw, Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Brian O'Neill. There's your starters. And then Justin School, Blake Brandel, Michael Juergens, and Walter Rouse. I think there is a pretty big drop-off from those 4 backups to like everybody else on the roster, from your Joe Hubers and your Vershawn Lees, or, guys like Leroy Watson and Logan Brown that are already cut. I think there's a pretty clear drop-off and not a lot of intrigue there. Joe Huber's the only one that had me raising an eyebrow for a second, but he kind of fell apart in his last 2 preseason games. I don't think he's ready for the NFL yet, but I love him as a practice squad guy. I think he's kind of going to be the new like Henry Bird, where they cross-train him and they give him a year. He does a lot of scout team, try to learn stuff, come back next year, see if he can't make the team. D-line has been the hardest one to predict all off season. I think it is 100% well within the possibility that the Vikings keep 7 guys at this, and they already traded one away in Harrison Phillips. In fact, Ben Gessling's 53-man roster, which is, by the way, identical to mine, except he didn't do the thing where he carved out a spot for a free agent. I don't think he allowed himself to do that. And he kept Elijah Williams, which I would absolutely keep Elijah Williams, but he has a hamstring injury. Hamstring injuries are not week to week. That's going to be a while, especially for a big guy like Elijah Williams. So I foresee him going on IR with designation to return. and then returning to the active roster. And I could see him getting real rotation here in the Minnesota Vikings defense. He played really well. I actually almost made a whole Patreon video about it before I learned the extent of his injury. Hopefully it's not too bad of a thing, but a hamstring is never going to be a few days. It's never going to be a day-to-day thing. A hamstring is always a week-to-week thing. So I think you shut him down for 4 weeks. You say rehab it, get better, will be 100%. And then you'll be back at the end of that. As for the guys who I actually have on the roster, of course, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Jalen Redmond is a lock. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins would be a lock even if he didn't have an outstanding camp in preseason, which he did. Levi Drake Rodriguez has earned his spot and then some, I think. And then the sixth, I was not going to keep Taki Taimani at all. I don't think he had that great of a preseason. But with Harrison Phillips out, he is one of the only like true big men, 2-gap nose tackles left in the whole building. Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave will be the main D tackles, but that's not what those guys do. Jalen Redmond also is not that kind of sized guy. You want these guys one-on-one with a guard. You want somebody else eating the double teams. And, Levi Drake Rodriguez, the hope is that he would be that guy. But you still would kind of need him to gain a lot of weight over what he is listed as. Everybody else, Levi Drake Rodriguez and Taki Taimani are the guys that played zero tech in the preseason. Everybody else played what I guess you'd call D-end because it's weird 3-4 terminology, but your kind of 4 technique, rush the B gap, be up against the guard, off to the side kind of position. And the guys on the inside are a little bit more scarce. So I do think Taki Taimani makes it just because you have to have another one of those big dudes on the roster just to rotate. On the edge, this is another group that has been exactly the same the whole offseason, at least to me. I don't think anybody has lost their job, and I don't think anybody else has cracked this. Jonathan Grenard, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, those are your main 3, and then Gabe Murphy has clearly made it and maybe even has eaten his way more into the rotation. He has been phenomenal this preseason. And Bo Richter, I think, has been really good this preseason and also has a lot of value on special teams. So that's been the group. If you want to look at other guys that could be, that could maybe have made some noise, Tyler Batty, he's also hurt, so he might be like waived injured, which is not super significantly different, but you should understand waived injured. If they clear waivers, they revert to IR. When you're injured, you almost always clear waivers. Nobody's putting on your active 53 if you're hurt. So then they revert to IR, and that's either, designated return or what. No, that's not designated to return. But once they're on IR, if it's not a true season-ending injury, there will come a moment where they're on injured reserve, but they are fully healthy, at which point they would get waived with an injury settlement. And they would essentially get like the money they are owed for whatever time they lost for not being allowed to play because of IR, and then they become a free agent. They can do whatever they want. At inside linebacker, off-ball linebacker, again, this is a pretty easy one. The only guy that really made any kind of push here would have been Brian Asamoah, and he's long gone. Brian Cashman, Ivan Pace, Eric Wilson, Kobe King, I think are very clearly the 4. You could make an argument for Austin Keys on special teams. You could also make an argument for Chaz Chambliss, who played a lot off the ball. And did a pretty bad job of it, in my opinion, and did a pretty bad job from scrimmage as well. But he's made a couple of really interesting plays from a special teams perspective. And I did genuinely flirt with Chaz Chambliss on this roster over somebody like a Miles Price, who I also don't feel super confident will make the team at all. But these were the kinds of decisions we're making. You're picking undrafted rookies and who didn't screw up quite as much as the other guy on special teams. If none of those guys make the roster and it turns out that they went and grabbed some other corner or something, they signed Stephon Gilmore and they said, sorry, Miles Price, you're out of here, and all you undrafted guys go back to the practice squad, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I'm not putting it in my 53-man projection here, but I definitely don't feel confident that I'm right about that. The secondary is what's coming up next. And so we can speak a little bit more about why I'm really worried about the secondary. And it's because the young guys that were supposed to step up didn't. And boy, we have been saying that for every year since the pandemic. So we got to have a real secondary discussion next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner. This is the time after cutdown day when everybody does their fantasy draft. So if you haven't set up yet, do it on fantasy football. I'm playing fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first timer or a veteran creating your millionth league. There are a whole bunch of really cute ways to play fantasy football, not just the classic redraft if you think that's stale, but that is, of course, the bread and butter. But if you want to try something new, try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. With season kickoff September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers even more fun ways to compete, like the Draft with Friends mode, which lets you play instantly with friends. And if you prefer the classics, you can, of course, still get your crew together and go head-to-head in a private league, or if you don't have a crew that big, no problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. Before we move on to complaining about the secondary a little more this offseason, real quick, there is a survey in the show notes that I would love it if you went and completed, if you can. So the secondary is in a weird way. Here's the cornerback group as I had it in my projection. Byron Murphy, Isaiah Rodgers, Jeff Okudah, Mekhi Blackmon, I'm already wrong about that, and Dwight McGlothern. I did not have Zemiah Vaughn making the team. I do think he could. I think him and McGlothern are very redundant, and I look at this group and I see Byron Murphy, Mekhi Blackmon, and 3 outside corners. A fourth one, I don't really see the point unless he does something on special teams, and I don't think Zemiah Vaughn really did anything special on special teams. I would much rather keep somebody like a Chaz Chambliss or a Miles Price that showed something on special teams, especially because none of these guys are getting in from scrimmage, so it has to be what you do. Otherwise, you're keeping somebody that's going to be a healthy scratch all year, and that is usually reserved for someone with like a ton of potential or somebody with a crazy spark score or a Levi Drake Rodriguez, a draft pick that's not ready to play yet, that kind of thing, and that doesn't really exist in this world. So I just couldn't find a reason to keep Zemiah Vaughn on the team. He had earned it, I think, in camp, and he even had one good preseason game, but he's like Joe Huber. I think he struggled in the first game, and he got cooked in the third game against the Tennessee Titans. That doesn't make the team. It's not good enough, especially if you're not a special teamer. He got a lot of hype from a good OTA and a good kind of early camp, but you have to play it out in the preseason. You don't get to have off days in the NFL. So I didn't see it. I think he's a great practice squad player. I think that's wonderful. And I love his odds to make the team next year if he does stick around in the organization for that long. But I didn't put him on my projection. With Mekhi Blackmon gone, I probably would. However, there needs to be an inside corner. There must. And it makes me feel actually a little better about what I did here in the safety room, which is Harrison Smith, of course, Josh Metellus, Theo Jackson, Jay Ward. Those guys are locks. Jay Ward also had a pretty good camp. I think he could have played his way out of Minnesota, but I think he fended that off. And the last guy on my roster, Will Reichard, Ryan Wright, Andrew DePaula, are the specialists. That's 52. The 53rd player for me was Tavierre Thomas. I think he did a little bit more on special teams than Zemiah Vaughn did. He was in the right place a little bit more often. He definitely had his bad moments in the preseason. That is for sure. And I think in a world where there was any roster pressure at all, you wouldn't even think about putting him on the team the way that his camp and preseason went. He ran with the threes basically all offseason. So him making the team, I know he's a veteran and he's had starting roles in the NFL before, but that doesn't get you very far. And he was below Zemiah Vaughn on the depth chart, for sure. The reason I'm doing this is special teams, and now that Mekhi Blackmon is gone, I feel a little better about it because he played nickel for most of his career. The Vikings moved him to safety and listed him at safety this year, but that was a new thing. And the line between safety and nickel cornerback is pretty blurry in the Flores defense anyways. So you could think of him as maybe like a backup Josh Metellus. I think that's Jay Ward. If Josh Metellus gets hurt, I think Jay Ward takes those snaps anyways, but now Tavierre Thomas gives you a little bit more flexibility. So I think I feel a little better about it, but this is another one. I think Thomas and Miles Price are 2 guys, and Ben Urasek are all guys that I think I would not be shocked at all to see those guys get cut and replaced with somebody who is not on the team. I'm not going to give myself 4 free agent / trade carve outs on my 53-man projection. That just feels like a cop out, but I could see it happening. And I can't remember that at all. I can remember sometimes when you had to bring in somebody random at the end of the roster, a Mark Fields or an Aldrick Robinson or something like that to like fill something out. But I can't remember a year where the bottom roster depth was like this unrosterably bad. I mean, look, player 50 is never a superstar, but there have been years when there are 8 candidates for player 50. And you have a really tough time because you have to figure out who you're cutting on the defense, and somebody really good is going to get waived, and you're going to lose out on somebody who's definitely getting claims. You get your T.Y. McGill type situations, whether it's roster pressure on a specific position or it's roster pressure entirely, where you go, man, there's 56 players I'd like to keep. Who's getting cut? It gets to be a really hard decision. That's definitely been the case in previous years, 21 and 23 in particular. I can think of that, especially because you want to keep your draft picks and stuff. So this is a year where I think there is especially little. I think that's a little bit of, draft misses catching up to them. We're getting to the point where, 3 years after 2022, and you don't have anybody in that class on your roster anymore except Naylor, you're starting to feel that, right? And 23 is going to be a lot the same with now Mekhi Blackmon being traded away. You didn't have a second because of TJ Hawkinson. You're still getting the impact of that, but that's not young players that are supposed to be stepping up into these roles yet. And of course you got Addison. So like the 23 draft still doesn't bug me really at all, but, and hey, Jay Ward is still around, but it's still, there is still very much a depth issue born of that. Plus, hey, Ivan Pace joining in 23, by the way, that didn't hurt either. Yeah, actually, you know what? I'm just going to go on record. 2023 was a good draft. Pound sand, if you don't want to count TJ Hawkinson and Ivan Pace, you're being bad faith. But the point I want to make is, in particular, the secondary is a deep and grave concern to me. A lot of this offseason, I would get asked, what's the thing that's going to like sink this Vikings year? And it was, to me, it was always the secondary. It was always the cornerbacks. Isaiah Rodgers has never started. Now, he's had a really good camp, and they seem to believe in him a lot. There's a lot of hype surrounding him, but he's never started a full year. Their third corner with a bullet is Jeff Okudah. Like, they will have Jeff Okudah on the field like a lot this year, not as a backup, which is what he was in Houston and what he was at the end of his time in Atlanta. So the only real proven corner is Byron Murphy of one, and then you're leaning on Jeff Okudah to just like magically be the reclamation project, and for them to just like do the rehabilitation thing with Jeff Okudah. He's had a good camp. Like, he's had a good process here. People seem to be relatively fine with him, but you got to be concerned. And if any of these guys twist their ankle, Dwight McGlothern's the next dude up. And he's never been a starter. He's an undrafted second-year player. And then who? Who's coming in? Somebody who hasn't been in your camp. Somebody who's probably not expensive unless they're going out and making a huge splash at corner instead of receiver, which I think would leave a lot of people disappointed because now what do you... Wide receiver 2 is Lucky Jackson now? Like, what are we doing? They have serious roster problems right now. And the only way to not feel those is to get lucky with injuries. They are asking to get lucky. They are saying, please may we get lucky so that this doesn't come back to bite us. And I criticized this all offseason, and a lot of people really didn't like it. I got mailbag questions that were like, you're being too harsh. People saying Brian Flores will figure it out. And I think at some point we have to draw a line on Brian Flores will just do magic to this. And set an expectation that, like, okay, you got to get him someone. Because, like, without Mekhi Blackmon, if Byron Murphy gets hurt, part of Brian Flores's methods for making corners look good is the big nickel package and what he can do out of the big nickel package and what that does for the two corners that are still on the field. You cannot do that if Josh Metellus gets hurt and you don't trust Jay Ward anymore. Right? You can't do, and on the flip side, Theo Jackson has proven nothing. They're excited about him as like an up-and-coming depth player who's going to take the next step. But if Theo Jackson ain't Cam Bynum, which is very much should be projected as a downgrade, you can't hide him without putting Jeff Okudah on the field. Brian Flores or not, one of those guys has to be on the field. One of those guys has to be good. And there's plenty of reason to be suspicious of both of them. The Vikings had ample opportunity to handle this. They could have approached the draft differently. They could have approached free agency differently. They did not. They got one Isaiah Rodgers, who was cheap because he's like Brian Flores' sleeper guy that he gets every year. They got Jeff Okudah, who is a reclamation project and cost nothing, and that is all they did. It is an extremely unserious way to address a problem that has been a problem for 5 years. I will leave you with this. In 2020, I want you to think about how you felt about the O-line. Dude, that was Dakota Dozier and Drew Samia year, right? I want you to think about like how you felt about that. And I think that was the last year of Riley Reif. That was a pretty frustrating O-line. And you were already frustrated from the Tom Compton 2018 year and all the problems that came with that. Not to mention, we weren't even that far removed from TJ Clemmings and the disasters thereafter, Mike Remmers. You were frustrated with the O-line because you had gone through 6 years of O-line ineptitude that started when Phil Lodeholt tore his Achilles in the preseason in 2015. And it had been a half a decade of them not being able to handle that. Matt Khalil ending his time and John Sullivan ending his time and Brandon Fusco being hurt and bad all at the same time. Well, fast forward to 2019. So just remember how you felt about the O-line 6 years after the last time the O-line was serious. 2019 was the last time the cornerback room was serious. That was the last time that it was Rhodes and Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander, and then they all left at the same time. Same thing. All of the starters left at the same time, and the Vikings were left with a completely barren room that they had to rebuild from scratch. They waltzed into that season, honest to God, starting Holton Hill, and not even Jeff Gladney, who could not start in that room, and then got cut the next year for other reasons. We are now in year 6 since that. This is the 6th season since that. And the cornerback room has at best been patchwork. And the best thing we've been able to say about it is that old guy is playing better than we thought he would. And we are back here again, hoping we can find the right 35-year-old who will sign up for the veteran minimum, who genuinely might be the same guy we had do that last year, who got cooked by the Rams, by the way, and the Lions. Hope we don't have to play him in the playoffs again. I mean, it is, I am so sick of patchwork. Really invest in the room. You have to. This is not the place to moneyball. It's one of the most important positions in the sport. But they're moneyballing it. And they're continuing to moneyball it by taking an already thin position and trading the guy away for a 6th-round pick. So this 6th-round pick better be worth it. This better not turn into a kicker because they didn't have anybody left on their board in the 6th round. This has to be turned into something. Maybe it will be. And maybe you're laughing at me now going, he doesn't know yet that they did something insane. In which case I will go live. By the way, if something big happens, I'll go live early and we'll do an emergency pod about it if it's like a big blockbuster. Otherwise, we'll pick up the pieces from Cut Down Day tomorrow on the Locked On Vikings podcast. I'll see you all whenever I see you. And as always, Skol.